If I told you that a Brazilian tank outperformed the world-famous Abrams, you'd probably write a long-winded post calling me insane in the comments. Contrary to what you may think though, in 1987 this is exactly what occurred in Saudi Arabia. This is the story of the Osorio, Brazil's only domestic main battle tank. Throughout history, there have been countless tanks, all designed to kill. But not all have been a success. What happened to the ones that never made it, and why did they fail? My name is Cone of Arc. Join me as we journey through time, uncovering failed projects and forgotten creations in Cursed by Design. You might not be testing main battle tanks in the Arabian desert, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't stay hydrated. Thanks to today's sponsor, The Coldest Water, you can do just that. Most bottles you get at the store aren't insulated well or at all, and can sweat all over whatever surface you put them on. Not only does this ruin anything that they may be near, but it also causes your drink to get warm much quicker. With the amazing insulation provided by the Coldest Water bottles, your drink stays ice cold for over 36 hours and won't cause a single droplet to get onto your desk or cup holder. Get yours today using the code CONE for 10% off, and if you don't like it, send it back for a full refund for a full year. Now let's see what made the Osorio so special. Back in the 1980s, Brazil was the world's 5th largest military exporter after the United States, the Soviet Union, France, and Britain. Unlike the other major exporters though, Brazil didn't start with a massive domestic military or try to use the exports for political gains. Rather, it was purely business and was mainly due to privately owned manufacturers. One of these private businesses was Engesa. Founded in 1958 by a group of engineers, they originally produced equipment for the petroleum industry, but helped propel Brazil to worldwide acclaim a little over 2 decades later with their wheeled military vehicles. Seemingly unsatisfied with this, they next set their sights on designing a main battle tank. Unlike other designs this series has discussed, the primary motivation for this was not to equip the Brazilian military, rather it was to export the tank. In the end, this resulted in 2 separate designs, one for domestic and one for foreign markets. Having very little experience with this type of vehicle, Engesa began by trying to partner with German tank designers like Porsche and Thyssen Henschel. Like most attempts at joint programs, this proved to be a dead end, and they would end up building the vehicle from scratch themselves. This is not to say they would only use domestically produced parts, however. Right from the start, it was clear relying on the national technology industry would not be sufficient to produce an MBT capable of competing on the world stage. This resulted in the company producing their own armored hulls, which they would then integrate imported components into. To move the tank, it was fitted with a V12 diesel engine from MWM International, which produced 1014 horsepower. This power was handled by a German 6-speed transmission from ZF Friedrichshafen AG, which gave it 4 forward gears and 2 reverse gears. For the suspension, the tank was equipped with the Dunlop hydropneumatic system, the same company behind the Challenger suspension. This would drive the tracks supplied by Diehl of Germany. The vehicle also made use of the British Marconi Centaur fire control system. The first prototype was finished in 1984 and was equipped with a 105mm L7 cannon. As it was planned as an export tank, and with the turret able to accept multiple sizes for its armament, 2 options were planned. This first option, with the 105, contained Belgian optics, with the commander having access to night vision. The gunner would also have night vision, but with the addition of a laser rangefinder as well as the ballistics computer. This allowed the tank to accurately hit moving targets. However, due to the periscopes being mechanically connected to the cannon, accuracy while the tank was in motion suffered. This first prototype would eventually be sent to Saudi Arabia in 1985 for a pre-selection process in an attempt to win a contract to supply them with the Osorio. The hodgepodge of technology succeeded in this process, placing it alongside the French AMX-40, British Challenger 1, and of course the M1A1 Abrams for the final selection. The only issues noted were the armament, which was only a placeholder, and some minor issues with the drivetrain. Back on Brazilian soil, it would then be subjected to another round of testing, which would further improve the final design. All the improvements would be incorporated into the second prototype, which also would be equipped with the second armament option. This new system would consist of the 120mm GIAT cannon, the same as the one on the French AMX-40 it would be up against. Completed in 1986, this upgunned version of the Osorio also was given some improved optics. The commander and gunner were each supplied with the French SFIM V6-580 Vicus periscopes, with the gunner also receiving a laser rangefinder and thermal imaging. The commander would also get a laser rangefinder and digital ballistic computer. Last but not least, the tank was given a Dutch Philips UA9090 night vision system. Unlike in the previous version, the ability to fire on the move was greatly improved with the new optics eliminating the issues from the previous model. This setup would be extremely similar to what was eventually installed on Challenger 2. In 1987, this definitive version of the Osorio was shipped to the Middle East for the selection process. Renamed to the Al-Fahd in honor of the Saudi monarch, it arrived for trials held in the Rub al-Khali, also known as the Empty Quarter. These tests were carried out over 2 months by Saudi crews and consisted of long-range off-road and on-road driving, mobility tests, fuel consumption, driving the tank in reverse for 6 kilometers, parking the tank for 6 hours with the engine running, towing a 35-ton tank for 10 kilometers, removal and installation of the tracks, trench crossing, tests of the performance on slopes, and finally firing trials. Remarking on the results of the tests in an interview years after, the then technical director of Engesa explained, "In the shooting and autonomy tests, Osorio far surpassed the North American rival. In the shooting tests carried out, Osorio was the only one to hit a target parked at 4,000 meters. A test was also carried out with a moving target at distances of 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500 meters. With a total of 12 shots, 6 of which were carried out by the crew of the country of origin, and 6 by the crew of the Saudi army. Of the 12 proposed targets, Osorio hit 8, M1 Abrams hit 5, and AMX-40 and Challenger only 1. In the autonomy tests, Osorio covered a straight line of 400 kilometers, leaving its competitors behind." This result was clearly shown when the announcement came in February of 1988 when the Saudis placed the Abrams and Osorio on their list, eliminating the AMX and Challenger. Not only had Engesa proved their design was sound, even though no official winner was crowned, their tank had proven to be capable of outperforming every vehicle it was tested against. Following this successful test, the United Arab Emirates invited Engesa to show their machine in Abu Dhabi against the Italian Ariete and AMX-40. Reportedly, the Osorio once again performed well, even towing the Ariete to the finish after it became disabled from an engine fire. By now you must be wondering why I'm even talking about this tank. It performed well and clearly was a good machine. Unfortunately, it would seem the Osorio's rise was only destined for a swift crash. Following the excellent results from the competitions, Engesa had high hopes for future contracts. In fact, it was expected that a $1 billion contract from the Saudis for about 315 tanks was highly likely. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of Brazilian officials to convince them to order the Osorio, the announcement in 1990 was instead in favor of the Abrams. This, combined with disinterest from their own military, caused overseas attention to shift from the design. In the end, only 5 prototypes were completed, with one of those not even being finished. Engesa had bet everything on the Osorio, and that had turned out to be their biggest mistake. As debt piled up, the company was forced to file for bankruptcy, which was eventually done in 1993. The pre-series tanks were scrapped and had components returned to alleviate some of the debts. With the Brazilian government being one of the main creditors for their debt, they decided to incorporate the remaining Osorio assets into their own military, which included the original 2 completed vehicles. So for years, the vehicles sat in storage with the 13th Mechanized Cavalry Regiment until they were to be auctioned off in 2002. Thanks to the public prosecutor in Sao Paulo, however, this was cancelled and the 2 tanks were finally added to the regiment in March of 2003. A decade later, the tanks were taken out of active service, with one being displayed at the Military Museum of Conde de Leones and the other at the Armored Instruction Center in Rio de Janeiro. The downfall of the Osorio had many factors. Despite it proving itself capable against most of the modern tanks at the time, Engesa was an unproven company and the machine itself was relatively untested. This likely played a large role in it losing to the Abrams, which had already been in service for nearly a decade. Politics may have also influenced the deal, with some sources saying the entire test may have been a clever trick to drive the price down on the American tanks. Regardless, the Osorio succeeded in proving that even the most advanced military machines could still be bested by anyone with enough ingenuity. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my new series, Forged for Battle. The first episode will be premiering in March with a focus on the world-famous Abrams we mentioned in this video. I'll leave you now with a brief preview of the series to whet your palate, and I hope to see you there.
What was meant to be a war to end all wars brought with it weapons unseen on any previous battlefield. One such advancement was the tank. Over a century later, these armored monsters are still a staple of warfare. Hundreds of designs have seen use in every conflict, from small local battles to the largest wars. In Cursed by Design, we see what causes some of these designs to fail. Now, prepare to dive into the complex stories of tank development as we peel back the pages of history on some of the world's most iconic designs. Through ingenuity, sweat and blood, these machines have been forged for battle.